CrimeCon UK is coming to London in 2025 on the 7th and 8th of June for 10% off day tickets and weekend tickets. Use the code CULT, C-U-L-T, at the checkout at crimecon.co.uk. CrimeCon UK is the best weekend of the year, and I really hope I see some of you there. Hello and welcome to the Cult Vault Podcast, your dedicated podcast for uncovering the darkest corners of cults and coercive control. I'm your host, Kacey, and I want to start by thanking each and every one of you for tuning in. Your support fuels our deep dives into these critical issues. Before we get started, a word of caution. Today's episode may contain discussions on abuse, including graphic descriptions of abuse, and covers a variety of human rights violations that may be triggering for some listeners. Please consider this as a trigger warning and proceed with caution. I'm thrilled to announce that I'll be appearing at CrimeCon UK in London on the 7th and 8th of June 2025, and again in Manchester on the 27th of September 2025. Join me and a host of world-leading experts, advocates and noisemakers at the heart of the true crime community. This is the UK's biggest true crime event, and you won't want to miss it. Use the code CULT, C-U-L-T, for 10% off your tickets. And remember, there are flexible tickets and payment plans available to accommodate everyone. This incredible event is sponsored by True Crime, and it's always my favourite weekend of the year. I hope to see some of you there. And for those who want even more from the Cult Vault podcast, you can access early, ad-free content by supporting me at patreon.com/thecultvault, where every pledge not only gives you exclusive access, but also directly supports the continuation of this work. Thank you again for your support and your listenership. Now, let's unlock the vault. And today we have a special surprise. Our guest Emily has been writing some really powerful music about her cultic experiences and some of the difficulties that she has had throughout her life. Emily has kindly shared some of her music with us today to be played on the podcast. A 1-minute sample of her new song will be played at the start of the episode, and the full song will be played at the end. The full song is particularly prevalent because it features Emily's late brother. So please do hang on until the end of the episode and listen to Emily's song in full. Thank you so much, Emily, for your strength and bravery, and for entrusting myself on the podcast in sharing your artistic work. I hope you enjoyed the song and my conversation with Emily. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Cult Vault podcast. Today, we are going to be diving into a group that has not been covered on the podcast before. Can't believe I'm still saying that some 400 episodes in, but we know how many cultic groups exist. So I'm so honoured to welcome onto the show today, Emily. Hello, and welcome, Emily.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
Yes, so my name is Emily. I am a third-generation cult survivor. My grandpa is a cult leader, or he was. He passed away. But so basically that was my whole life. The first half of my life, I did not know what it was like to have love and support around me. I did not have freedom to be myself. And so I'm just really happy to share that I finally have a good life now, and I get to create. I love to do music and art and makeup art, and I have a beautiful family. I'm in an open adoption. I have a beautiful daughter, and her first mom is like very close to me. And so all these things in my life that I never dreamed I would get to have, came true. And if anyone out there feels trapped in a cult or wants to have hope, I just hope I can share that hope today.
That's a really strong message to start on, especially when there are themes of, um, existential threats that come through a lot of the interviews that happen on the show. If you leave, you'll never be happy. If you leave, you'll never have this, you'll never have that, you'll never have unconditional love. And yet here you are with all of those things, despite not being in the cult anymore.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Every second that I get to be free, I keep smiling and I'm just so grateful.
Group is a new one. I was surprised to read of the details of this particular cult when your email came through, especially because it seems to be a pretty prominent group at a prominent time where lots of these groups kind of sprouted up. So your granddad, he was a cult leader.
Mm-hmm.
How does that happen? Did he always know he was going to be a cult leader, or was it something that morphed over time? What is the story of His Way Ministries?
So my grandfather was a military chaplain, and then his whole life was very bizarre. He grew up during the Great Depression. So actually, from when he was a very young age, he lived with boarders in his house. So he lived in a community setting in his own home. And I believe that's where his attachment issues came from, where he just really became accustomed to getting close to people quickly who weren't that close to him, and being comfortable and having kind of a family type role in the house with these strangers who moved in. This is back in the 1930s, but that's just my theory. Because through his whole life, he didn't really have a present father in his life. And he did have these strangers move in, and he lived in a communal situation since the 1930s. Then in the 60s, he was a military chaplain, and he was away from his family a lot, away from his kids, my dad and, my grandmother. And then after he left the military, he decided to start this ministry where he started welcoming basically teenagers and becoming like a father-like figure to them. And I think in his mind, he must have thought that this is something he didn't get to have when he was growing up, and he wanted to pass that on. So yeah. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I went rambling there.
Yeah, a great summary of how this group came about. It's giving me kind of like Teens for Christ, the early renditions of the Children of God, when David Berg would proselytize to teens on the beach and they would get together, and that's kind of what his early ministry looked like. And I believe it was around about the same period in history that this group kind of got its momentum going as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really believe that a lot of the cult leaders from that time period were affected by the military right before that, and maybe even the Great Depression when all the communal living was happening, because that was when your attachment issue or form is when you're like 5 years old. Around then is when you form your primary attachment. So can you imagine living with a bunch of strangers during the Great Depression? I mean, just my theory, but yeah. So my grandpa, he had basically a lot of people that looked up to him like a father-like figure. Yeah, he really spent time with them in a nurturing, fatherly kind of way that he never did with his own family. He just didn't know how to do that. And so he had multiple locations in California, including Pleasant Hill and San Francisco. And he did a lot of pro-life activism stuff, but we can get into that. But,
he starts this group. He is a father figure. He's the kind of nurturing, charismatic leader that is seen at the forefront of a lot of kind of destructive groups. But it sounds like it starts off as like a pleasant group, quite benign. Is that how you think it was happening at that time, or do you think even from the beginning there were some undertones of kind of things to come?
My understanding is that his he was very abusive when my parents or when my dad was a kid, and so my understanding is that he always had just a very toxic way of being, but he yeah, I really think it was pretty toxic from the beginning from what I understand. But he really branched out into having more locations. There was a time period before I was born where they had a commune that was on the same street as Jim Jones. And I'm told that people would like show up at his place at His Way thinking it was Jim Jones because they have the same first two names, James Warren. And yeah, just I'm sorry, what was your question again?
Oh, sorry, it wasn't. It was just kind of like asking whether there was always a kind of a dark undertone to the group, or whether it started off with good intentions and slowly turned into something really controlling.
Yeah, no, I believe he was always very controlling. And in fact, when he left the military, I'm told it had to do with his behavior and that he didn't want to work on Sundays, and he tried to petition that he wouldn't have to do military work on Sundays, and he ended up being discharged from the military. So I believe he's always had some issues with his personality and stuff.
And his name, James Warren,
Yeah.
same name as the guy down the road, James Warren Jones, who
Yeah.
becomes the leader of the People's Temple. So the People's Temple Church is just down the road from one of your granddad's locations at this time.
The same block. That's where, as far as I know, I think that's where my mom moved in, and that's where they got married, like really quickly after that in
It's wild.
1971. Yeah.
What are the chances? What are the chances of that? I mean, it wasn't long after that the the group moved over to South America, so that's just wild to me. That blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of tea for sure.
The fact that they have the first two names as well is just really strange.
Mm-hmm.
But you've mentioned here your third generation, that your mum and dad met and they married really quickly in the group.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the story there between your mother and father? Did your mum's mum become a part of the group? Is she second generation, or did she join or get recruited on her own?
So my mom came to San Francisco when she was a young woman. She had she had left Oregon and came to San Francisco to volunteer for what she understood to be a ministry, street preaching, passing out Bibles around like Haight Ashbury and stuff like that. And so that is what she signed up for, and it involved free lodging at His Way Ministries. So she moved in with them in this big house kind of building. This was before I was born, so I don't have memories of this building, but yeah. And then my understanding is that they got married within 3 months of meeting each other at my grandfather's chapel. My grandfather conducted the wedding.
I was going to ask that question. That is fast, and I know that can happen in these groups. But oftentimes at that pace, it's because two people have been matched or paired or encouraged to be together by somebody in leadership. So is that what you believe happened here?
Without saying too much about my father, I really think he has that kind of personality, just like his father, that's very quick to be charming and charismatic and, narcissistic. And I think that's kind of how things move so quickly. So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
So how long after that until you're born then?
So I arrived to this earth in the mid 80s, 1986, and I had two older siblings, and then yeah, later I'll get into that later, but later when we found out my mom was pregnant with my little sister, that was the same time we found out we're moving to the middle of nowhere in Kansas.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's this big shift that happens where there's three of you, about to be four.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any context for the change in your grandpa having multiple settings in kind of urban areas to wanting to move to somewhere more isolated? Like, do you have how old were you at this time, and do you have an idea of why that choice was made?
So I believe I was about 5 years old when we moved, somewhere around there. You mentioned asking me about earliest memories. Can I share a memory of His Way?
Yes, please do.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So I I will never forget this, but I was in the His Way Chapel as a little girl, and everyone was singing this song called As the Deer and waving their hands in the air, like singing praise music. And I remember my grandpa, his voice sounded so kind and comforting. And I actually looked forward to the services at that time because that was the one time I got to see him behave like a kind grandfather. Um, and after the services, he had dozens of followers who all behaved like aunt and uncles to me, and they gave me gifts, and they were always kind and played with me and spent time with me more than my parents really did. And they always told me, "You are so lucky, Emily, that Jim is your grandpa. He's such a great guy." And yet, when they were not there, when it was just my grandpa and our family, my grandpa always made fun of them. And he always made fun of their, this is just on my mind now as so many people are affected by cults at this time. But yeah, he had so many adoring people, but when those people were not around, he always made fun of them and called them jackasses and yeah, and talked about how they were going to pay for his next venture. And forgive me if that goes off the trail from what you're asking. But anyway, forgive me, what was the question?
No, don't apologize. So I think usually when people just let their thought streams go, that's when and I love listening to people remember things in real time. Um, and as I said, I'm making notes as we go, so we can always come back to where we were. That there's no stress with that at all.
Okay. So to kind of answer your question, I went from being around my grandfather's followers in the big city and always at these riots, like pro-life rallies, holding signs as a little kid outside abortion clinics, and being at gay parades. And my dad was filming a documentary series at the time at these gay parades. And yet, when we moved to the country, which was very last minute, all I could see was big fields and almost nothing there and almost nobody there. And I felt like Laura Ingalls Wilder from Little House on the Prairie. Like, I just felt it was so different. It was so new. Yeah.
When you are living in the city areas, and you're going to all of these protests, what is your life like at home at this point? You mentioned that you didn't have as much contact with your parents growing up as you did with some of the other followers of your grandpa. What was it like education wise, like friendship wise? I know you said you moved when you were around 5, but my son is 5 and he has more of a social life right now than I do. We just got back from a kid's birthday party, so some 5-year-olds are super busy. I'm just wondering if you remember what your kind of day-to-day life was like at that time.
Oh, in San Francisco?
Yeah.
Yeah. So most of our friends were His Way members, and I really didn't have any friends my age at that time. So it was me and my two older siblings who I love very much. And I remember we were folding leaflets for one of Grandpa's political campaigns. I was not even 5, and I was here folding papers to pass out to people for his campaign. But we made up this song together, and that is such a good memory, just joking around, because that helped us get through. While our parents, their whole lives were revolving around His Way and just constantly volunteering. So we would spend long hours, just us 3 kids in Grandpa's office that had like pro-life signs taped all over the walls. And yeah, but if you want, I can sing you the song. I don't know.
Please, that'd be great.
Okay. So this is at a time when we literally folded hundreds of leaflets for my grandpa's campaign at the San Francisco City Hall. And my dad was like making all his commercial video stuff. So my older sister started singing this, and then we all started laughing, and we sang together. Watch my video, Jim Robinson. I told you 1,000 times. Anyway, I don't know. It's just, we tried to get through with a sense of humor. And yeah, anyway, that was great. I thought of my
so funny
that time. Yeah, so silly.
It's important to reflect on the positive memories from those times as well, and the people that get you through those trying periods, because that's like child labor, isn't it? You're 5 years old and you're folding leaflets.
Yeah, and on my dad's video series that he shot of the gay parades and everything, he did a 7-part documentary series about the homosexual lifestyle from a Christian point of view. But we were like his production assistants. He had us carrying his microphones and everything. So it was so, I definitely should not have been at those events as a little kid. I wish I didn't have to be, but yeah, it was such a weird time. Just signs, people yelling and carrying signs around and stuff. It definitely was not an environment I should have been in as a child.
Do you recall when the pro-life kind of teachings aspect came into His Way Ministries? Was it always something that your grandpa had as a part of the group, or did that kind of manifest over time? I know I'm asking you lots of stuff about from when you were really young, but I don't know how much context you've had added from, other adults and things since your childhood.
Yeah. So there was a time period around when I was 4 when my family was going to another church. And I think it was my family's way of trying to have a little bit of independence from my grandpa's family with the sermons and everything. So we went to a different church founded by somebody else. And he actually founded the first crisis pregnancy center in Northern California. So I was at the grassroots of I was in and out of there as a little kid, seeing people donating diapers and baby clothes. And yeah, so that was quite, yeah, that was a whole nother thing. But can you remind me the question again?
Just wondering how the pro-life aspect of the group started.
Yeah, my grandpa, he was counseling women, and he had in his office, he had models of like fetuses and stuff like that. And I remember he actually was in jail when I was really little, and I'm told it had to do with something he did outside of abortion clinics. To this day, I don't know what he did that landed him in jail, but I visited him in jail when I was a little kid, and there was like a glass wall in one of those phones with the cord attached. And yeah, I visited him with my dad one time. And I remember my grandpa always bragged about his experience in jail as like something to be proud of, like that he did it for his faith. And he compared himself to the Apostle Paul being in prison. And yeah, but it had something to do with, my theory is he was harassing women at an abortion clinic, but I don't really know. I wish I could find that out. Yeah.
And at some point, this pro-life aspect of the group transforms into your grandpa running for some position in like the local council or the local government.
Yeah. I do not remember what the position was. I could probably find that out. But it was around 1990, and it was at the San Francisco City Hall. And he also knew Dan White. If you're familiar with Harvey Milk and Dan White, he was actually the minister to Dan White in prison after Harvey was killed, if you've heard of that. But yeah, so he was very active there, but I don't know what position he was trying to be elected for.
I wonder if that came off of the back of him having so much support and being popular within his own ministry. And, if people think, oh, maybe I should run for mayor, or maybe I should try this because I'm really popular here with my people, so maybe I will be out on the streets.
Yeah, I remember he was confronting one of his co-leaders for His Way about the election, because I think he had this expectation that all of His Way followers would be voting for him, and not everybody wanted to, because he wasn't paying them properly and they were kind of starting to stand up for themselves a little bit. So I remember overhearing a conversation where he was like really stern with a guy named Dave, who was helping co-lead the operation at His Way. And he was like, you have to vote for me. And Dave like was setting some boundaries basically, and it wasn't going over well. So yeah, I was just a little kid, but I heard.
When you would go to these rallies, do you remember the types of things that you were holding up signs, right? We've seen things like this in the Louis Theroux documentary with the Westboro Baptist Church. So is it the same sort of setup with kids just holding up signs that they can't even read because they're so young?
Yeah, they used to put ribbons in my hair and make me wear a cute dress. And they told me if I looked cute enough, that maybe a mom out there would change her mind about abortion. Maybe somebody out there would see, oh, this is what it would be like to have a cute little girl. And so, ironically, my mom had to get support from a crisis pregnancy center when she was pregnant with me. And there's so much about that story I don't know, except that she didn't have a lot of support around her when she was pregnant with me because my dad and grandpa were out of state. So, yeah, I just felt like this poster child for the pro-life movement, and I didn't really want to be. I just wanted to have a childhood. And one thing that really has stuck with me for the rest of my life is just the severe lack of education they had about adoption, and just horrible things. Just they believe in coercion. It's just so bad. And really, my life today, I have a open adoption. My daughter's first mom is a huge part of her life and a huge support to her life, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But it's just so different than anything I was taught as a little kid. So, go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh, I just wanted to say one of the things that really stuck with me that I did not agree with that I had seen in the, pro-life events as a little kid was the Christians were very rude to the women who were going into these abortion clinics, and they treated them like they were less than, like that they weren't people of worth. And that always really bothered me as a little kid. I had to do a lot of therapy to work through that. Even just that by itself was, yeah, that really messed with me, that to see that level of unkindness.
Yeah. So for any reason a person would be accessing, that type of support or that type of facility, even without the context. I mean, the context doesn't really matter, but you don't know the personal circumstances from person to person. You know, there could be somebody that is dealing with, like Dr. Warren Hearn said on the show a few weeks back, somebody could be in a life or death situation. It's either carry this baby to full term and die, or don't continue with the pregnancy and live. And I know it's not that black and white, and I know the context doesn't matter person to person, but it's like the harassment of every person going into this facility. It's like, you know, it doesn't make sense to just harass every person, even just the people that work there, you know, going there to do a job and they're getting harassed on the way in. Yeah, it's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely don't think women should be shamed ever like that. And that is a huge part of why, even though I call myself a Christian, I do not agree with the pro-life movement. I find it to be rooted in a lot of darkness. So, yeah.
I imagine that current affairs and the political climate make things kind of almost like triggering in some ways.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And my heart goes out to anyone else feeling that, because boy, it is stressful. It definitely requires a lot of self-care to get through this time.
When your move to the countryside happened,
Mm-hmm.
was this on the back of your grandpa like not getting the elected position he wanted, or was there a reason behind the kind of country over the city?
Yeah, so he had a falling out with some of the His Way members, and I remember it's so wild. I remember my grandma asked me to come to the table. She had a pair of like kids, like toddler scissors. And she was like, come over here. And I thought she was giving me paper dolls to play with, but it was actually, she wanted me to cut out people's faces from the group photos who had left His Way. And that just really affected me. But to this day, I have a relative out there. To this day, I don't know their name. I don't remember what they looked like, because we had to cut out their face from all the family photos and stuff. But as far as like my grandpa leaving to go to the Midwest, I believe it had to do with his losing the election, and then he had some of the members of His Way set some boundaries and he didn't like it. And so he kind of didn't have the same power he had before that with people there. People were standing up to him a little bit. So, yeah.
Was it a case of like, anyone that wants to stay with me can move over to this part of the countryside and we're going to start again?
Well, we always, me and my siblings would joke that His Way actually meant Grandpa's way, not God's way. But uh, yeah, so it ended up just being my grandpa and grandma, a secretary who had just newly joined, this beautiful woman in her 30s, really kind lady to me for many years, and then my parents, and then my siblings and me. After being in this group that I would guess was about 80, I don't know, because I could tell you about probably like 300 people over those years in my early childhood, but I really couldn't say. But if you can picture just the group suddenly getting a lot smaller. Yeah.
And do you remember the move? Any particular aspects of it, of those moments stand out? Because I imagine it's quite a significant experience, you know, a young person going from being around all these people and having all these sermons to go to and having a busy kind of city life, to going and living almost in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. I remember I traveled by airplane with my grandma and my mom, because my mom was high risk pregnancy with my little sister, and then the rest of the group traveled by van. They used the His Way van to travel. It was this big blue, I think it was a Ford Econoline, maybe. I'd have to go look it up, but it was this huge van, and they took my cat with them, and they they just packed everything up in this giant van. And then when we get there, I remember just feeling terrified, because I wasn't used to seeing bugs, and the in the city, I only saw like a housefly or something. And then one day, as I'm walking on the farm, I walked past this tree and dozens of butterflies, like huge butterflies, flew out at me. And it was like terrifying. I was sobbing. It was so scary as a little kid to not be used to that. Yeah. So just we basically went from living in the city to starting basically our own farm, like our own homestead. Yeah. Building everything from scratch, installing the plumbing, electricity, everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what level of work was required from you as a young child during this process?
I in the building process, I remember they would have the frames up for the buildings. Like my dad and grandpa built the house I grew up in on that farm. It was kind of in the shape of a large barn. And I remember before the sheetrock was down, I had to like nail the frame. And this is before I was 8 years old. So it just was so wild that I even had to do that. But yeah, so I spent hours like using stain on the porch, like staining the front porch, hammering nails, sanding wood, like using sandpaper on wood, and what else? Painting. When they were finishing the bedrooms, I had to help paint them.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we got animals, we got buffalo. We had 17 buffalo, and I had to help shovel their manure. That was not fun. I had to shovel manure for horses, buffalo, sheep. Um, and we had a miniature horse and just a lot of labor on the farm. And we also had chickens, and I had to gather eggs and feed the chickens. And yeah. So, you asked about my education. I was homeschooled this entire time. So I was homeschooled up until I was 18 years old. And my family got a Christian curriculum that like taught the Bible and stuff like that. And basically I would have books put in front of me and told I had to learn it, but I didn't have like a proper teaching experience.
With the roles that you had on kind of the homestead in the day-to-day operations, if I'm doing like DIY, my kids always want to get involved. They're like, let me use the hammer, let me use the saw. And I'm like, they're not really for children. How about you help me glue some things over here?
Yeah.
And I think, kids often have chores. They have, like, oh, you can wash the dishes after dinner, and then maybe at the end of the week, if you've done your weekly jobs, you get some pocket money and you can spend that on, whatever you want. So I think there's a balance between involving your children in day-to-day jobs so that they can learn, transferable skills, and giving them responsibilities in jobs so that they can earn some pocket money, or maybe they can get some, trips out to the cinema or whatever. But what you've described is something completely different. This is like child labor and exploitation. And I think it's always really important to highlight the differences between those things. So I didn't know if you wanted to kind of add anything to that and just kind of highlight the severity of your situation in comparison to just letting your kids join in so that they can learn a thing or two.
Yes. So His Way would have volunteers who were coming to help build the ministry property. Their goal was to build a retreat center for pastors to be staying there overnight, to have a respite. That's what they called it. And so we were building these places for people to sleep overnight, in addition to the house we built on our own. And so, but my grandpa didn't really pay people properly. So basically, he would pay people at first. My grandma would feed them this really beautiful feast of like a pot roast and everything that just seemed very like comforting and at home kind of style cooking like you'd get from your grandma. And then these people would be wheeled in, they would move in to be volunteers. And then after a few weeks, my grandpa would stop paying them and tell them that, well, you're serving God, so you don't have to be paid. So what ended up happening was, I don't want to speak for my siblings, but I can say that I was sex trafficked, and some of my siblings were as well, where the ministry volunteers, we were set up to be with them. And I remember my grandma called. She lived next door to us. My grandma and grandpa lived next door to us in this mobile home. And she said, Emmy, can you come over? I want to introduce you to somebody. And this was before Google Maps or Google Earth, where you can look anywhere in the world and see what the land looks like and everything. And she introduced me to this man who was a aerial photographer. He photographed the land in that area, and he had stopped by the property to try to sell his photo of our ministry property. And my grandma really wanted a copy of it. But it was a few $100s that he was asking for, and my grandma did not have that money. So what ended up happening was she introduced me to him. She said, Emily, look at this photo. It's so cool. And that was the first time I saw how desperate my situation was. I saw this property, just a handful of buildings in the middle of nowhere. And I saw it from a bird's eye view, and I saw all the land surrounding it for many, many miles, and it was all empty. And it just was the first time in my life I realized I was trapped, that I was isolated, and that I didn't have a way to get out. And that man, the photographer, my grandma nodded to him. She left the room, and then he asked me to sit on his lap, and he groped me for a few minutes. And I don't remember everything that happened. I know he kissed my hand. I was only like 10 years old. That should have not have happened. But because he spent time with me, she ended up getting the photo for either for free or way discounted. And then that photo of the ministry property, she ended up showing to all the women from Bible study who would come over to her house. And she would like brag about, look, we have this awesome photo of the whole property we have. And it just always hurt my heart to see that photo.
It's always difficult to know what to say after somebody shares an experience of child sexual abuse.
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
No,
I am sorry. I'm sorry, and I know how hard it must be to relive those experiences and to share them here. And I am so thankful and honored that you feel comfortable and safe enough to do that. But I don't underestimate the impact that it has reliving those experiences, and just hearing you talk about how isolated you were as a child, and having those things happen at the behest of your own like direct family. It's a really tough thing.
Yeah.
And I know that you're talking about it from a place of healing and recovery, but the fact that it happened to begin with is a really hard thing to think about. So I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I think
I don't know what happened to Grandma, but Grandma and Grandpa, they are not a good pair, either of them.
no, they made some huge mistakes, and I really, honestly, I feel like I didn't really get to grow up with actual grandparents. That's how I feel. In terms of like having loving, supporting people, I didn't really get to grow up around that. But that photograph that guy took is such a huge moment for me as a cult survivor to recognize the danger I was in, because that was the first time I got to see our buildings, my home, our property in the middle of dozens and dozens of miles of almost no buildings at all. So that really, as hard as that experience was, that photograph I hold in my mind is like, that's what helped me understand that I need to escape, that I needed to be free.
I know that there were several other things that impacted your independence and critical thinking, I suppose. Support that you did get from others that you hadn't had before. And just kind of like the change in circumstances that you had gradually over time. And I know that there's some things that you don't want to speak about directly, but I wondered if you could just talk us through how things changed for you from that point on and the people that came into your life that had a positive impact.
My parents, when they finally made the decision to leave the farm, that was life-changing for me, but it was so difficult to adjust. So they had a falling out with my grandparents, and they saw in themselves that they needed to make some changes that were positive. And even though it was not perfect, like because they left and lived in a town, that changed my life for the better. So my parents moved to a town that was an hour away. And for the first time in my life, I got to experience like shopping at Old Navy and not having all of my wardrobe come from a missionary box or from my brother's closet. Like I wore all his old hand-me-downs and I wore prairie dresses and everything on the farm. Suddenly I was in a town where there was shopping, there was grocery stores that I could go to regularly, and it felt like Disneyland. It was just so new to me. Things like using an ATM for the first time, like it all felt like learning a foreign language. But there was still a lot of strict rules in our family. And one of them was that you have to go to church every Sunday. And I recognized in myself that I did not want to go to church with my family. I was being so controlled and abused. And I found a church that was within walking distance from our house. And that was my only option because I didn't have a car or anybody to give me a ride to anywhere else. So I walked to this church and I met a lady there, Mary, who was really kind to me. And she greatly impacted my life today. She was always welcoming. She didn't judge me. She always just let me be me. And she invited me to the youth group that she was leading with her husband and some of the other adults from the church. And that was just the first time in my life that I got to be around teenagers my age for very much. And it was so awesome. Like, actually, it was the only time that week that I would get to have consistent food because the church was serving pizza to the teenagers, and it just meant so much to me to get away from the abusive home and be somewhere for 2 hours every week around Mary and some other people I really liked. So, yeah, she just, there was a praise band in the church, and she invited me to sing with them. And so I got to, as a young, like 15, 16-year-old kid, I got to sing up front at church. And, well, her husband was playing bass guitar and she was also singing. And I just remember discovering I love music and feeling empowered singing out loud. When I come from a place where I couldn't use my voice out loud, I couldn't do art without being punished or anything like that. So yeah, that was really meaningful.
Absolutely love Mary. This is like a dichotomy. You've got your grandpa starting a group targeted towards teenagers and being really controlling and, you know, conditionally loving towards people. And then, you know, what sounds like purposefully isolating you and your family on a homestead that is just really detrimental to your development as a child. And that's without, you know, the lack of education, the sexual exploitation, the child labor. Then you've got Mary, who, you know, outreaches to teenagers, feeds them, nurtures their creativity, fosters a community of young people. This is all of the things that on the surface, you know, your grandpa was supposed to be doing when he first started His Way Ministries. And then you've got this woman that just comes out of nowhere and she's doing all of those things. And she's doing them unconditionally.
Yeah, she was amazing. And there was a song we sang in the church that everyone stood in a circle and held hands, and I remember that song is both a painful memory and a good one, but do you want me to sing a little bit, or
if you're comfortable with it, I would love to hear it.
They will know we are Christians by our love, by our love. They will know we are Christians by our love. And I pray that our unity may one day be restored. They will know we are Christians by our love, by our love. They will know we are Christians by our love. That was, sorry, I feel shy, but that was one of the last songs I got to sing with Mary. And I think she really meant it when she sang that song.
It was beautiful. Thank you so much, Emily.
Oh, heck, a little bashful.
That was lovely. I mean, I'm not a religious person, but I can understand the impact that music has, on spiritual practices, because I get shivers from music when I'm just driving in my car. To have unity and community, and to sing songs of love together with a group of people that you feel loved by and comfortable with must be an elevating experience.
I felt like I belonged, and I felt accepted, and I felt like that was a place where they told me about Jesus, but I didn't feel like I was in danger. Well, I thought that anyway, but then things changed. And can I go ahead and tell you about that?
You tell me at your own pace the things that you want to talk about today.
So I reached that point where I felt accepted by this church. I felt the kindness of the people there. The church was extremely kind to young teens and kids in foster care, which is something I deeply value. And there was a boy in my youth group who I really liked being around. He was a funny guy. And I remember my church was supporting him as he was about to age out of foster care. They were getting him furniture, bedding, towels for his new apartment, for his future apartment that he was preparing to move to. And I just remember seeing that and thinking to myself, this is what the church is supposed to be. This is what Jesus is supposed to be all about, like helping people and just unapologetically letting people be themselves as they are, And I also remember feeling a little bit of jealousy because they were helping him and I didn't have anybody, even though my family led ministry and all that. Like, I didn't have anybody to help me as I was going to go to college and all that. But one Sunday at youth group, this kid, I will call him Kevin. It was a night when there was pizza and soda, and I just remember just being so excited to be there. But Kevin was telling other kids in the youth group that he was going to set his apartment on fire. And I looked across the room and I just couldn't believe he said that. And one of the very first adults I told was Mary, because I trusted her and I knew she would take me seriously. And she whispered to me to tell her husband. I won't tell you her husband's name, but she whispered to me to tell her husband and the other youth leaders. So I went there with one of the other girls from my youth group. She and I agreed we got to tell the adults. And so I went to her husband, Mary's husband. He was about to leave the building and his back was facing me. And when I said, Kevin says he's going to set his home on fire, this guy, my youth pastor, just froze. His arms stiffened to his side, and he kind of slowly turned around and he's like, oh, well, he's not actually doing that. He's a kid. He's not really going to do that. And then he didn't take it seriously. And then I went and told somebody else who I really love this person. Like, she was so kind to me, one of the female youth leaders. And she kept trying to assure me. She said, teenage boys say things, it's not really going to happen. And so that night, I went home and I told my mom, because I thought, surely, I've told all the adults in the church, I'm going to tell my mom. And she was in her sewing room. The window was open. She was facing her sewing machine, and there were like crickets outside singing really loud. And her response was not easy. I told her, Kevin said he's going to set his apartment on fire. He says it's going to be, the biggest fire he'd ever seen. And she said, oh, Emily, you're overreacting. Stop bothering me. He's not really going to do it. Boys say things. And that night, by the end of that night, I had told at least 8 adults, and nobody listened to me. And I was this scrawny teenager. I was quiet. I was timid at that time, and nobody listened to me. And then a few months went by, and then my mom tells me that my friend Mary had been murdered. She said, Emily, have you seen the paper? And I hadn't. And it turned out that Mary had been murdered by asphyxiation, and her husband, my youth leader, was the main suspect. And I just felt so shattered. Like, I felt like, man, I really tried to find a good church. I tried to find a healthier thing, and I thought I found a good thing. And I went back to church, the same one, after that at some point, and the pastor was announcing that they were raising money to support my youth pastor in the murder trial. And I just remember feeling so disheartened. Like, that just didn't seem like the right thing to do. And they even talked about trying to get him out for a little bit so that he could come back and attend church. This man who was in charge of leading kids and was a murderer. And as a teenager, that just felt so uncomfortable to me, and I stopped attending. And then, forgive me, I'm doing my best here with it being very traumatic for me. So I know trauma, I try to say it chronologically, but you know how it can be. It's so anyway, it turned out my youth pastor had been having an affair with another woman, and that's why he decided to murder his wife, my friend, Mary, and he ended up going to prison. And he, as far as I know, he married that woman, and some of the members from the church even attended the wedding. That just blows my mind that these people who were friends with Mary went and attended the wedding of his new wife. It's so wild. But anyway, so I, at that point, detached from the church completely. I was becoming an adult, and I was on my own. And I found a local news station that would have internships, and I got a job there, and that was a really big opportunity for me because I had nobody supporting me to go to college or anything. And then this opportunity meant I would be able to have free training in camera and graphics for the news, in audio engineering and things like that just were so meaningful to me to learn. To even have the chance to learn that for free, I felt very grateful. So one night, I'm this young woman going there, walking both ways each way. And I was doing graphics for the news. It was about 10 minutes before we were going to go live on air. It was in October. And when you get a graphics request, it's like an email that comes into your inbox and it says, hey, can you make this picture that's going to go above the news anchor's shoulder? I forget what they called that back then, but I would have less than 10 minutes to make this graphic in Photoshop that would go live on the news. And to my dismay, the email subject line was arson. And I opened the email, and it was the face of my friend from youth group. He had gone through with it, with the apartment fire, and I just remember feeling, just like it felt unreal. Like it felt, I had to hold in my emotion and get through photoshopping his face into this graphic with flames around it and stuff. And I just remember feeling like, how can I even speak up about this? I didn't know. I was just trying to survive and pay rent at that point, and I needed that job. But, yeah. So that night at the news station, I felt like I couldn't say anything, because I was just trying to hold it together. We had to go live at 10. I didn't say a word about me knowing this kid. And I didn't say a word about knowing that he actually did it, that it was premeditated, because I just was so shocked. I was absolutely shocked. 3 people passed away from that fire. And I've had a lot of people over the years ask me, Emily, do you feel guilty that you couldn't stop it? And I really don't, because I really did everything I could, but it hurts my heart so much to know that these people didn't listen. And that, I don't know, it just hurts my heart. But, so I went, I got through that night at work and I didn't say anything.
So in some of the correspondence you sent me about your experiences, you mentioned that at some point the police became aware of your knowledge of Kevin's premeditation and they reached out to you to ask you to confirm what you knew. And I'm just wondering if you could explain to the listeners like how that happened, from you going in the news station and finding out about the apartment fire to the police tracking you down and asking you what you know.
Yeah. So I was still, even though I was not living with my family at this time, I was still at their house a lot, visiting my little brother, who I helped raise him, my little brother Nathan. So I was spending a lot of time over there. And I remember when everything went down, when Kevin went through with it, I talked to my mom, and eventually she apologized for not listening to me, and I really appreciated that, but it was very painful. And then from my family's house, I called one of the other youth leaders, the lady who I really respect and love, and I told her about it. I was like, do you remember I told you Kevin said he was going to do this? And she didn't believe me. It was like she didn't remember it. But I'm also trying to have grace for her that she was very close to Mary, and Mary had been murdered after I tried to warn people. So the way I look at it now, I really think that was so much trauma on in their experience that maybe they really didn't remember me warning them. And I forgive them that they didn't listen to me. But she ended up being so upset, she hung up the phone on me. And then the very next month after the fire, my grandma had a stroke, my grandma Fleta. And I was told I had to go to the hospital to go say goodbye to her. And then I saw her face and it was unlike anything I've ever seen before. Her eyes were always glazed over when I lived with her on the commune and everything. They were always glazed over, and she was always seemed brainwashed and just weird. Yet when she had her stroke and half of her face was like paralyzed, her eyes looked so clear. And I remember just thinking, this is the first time I get to see my grandma. Like this, I wonder if this is who she was before she joined His Way. And I don't know the answer to that because I never got to talk to her again after that. That was the last time I saw her alive. But that was such a unique experience. And then with that going on right after the fire happened, and then the whole family was going to revolve around His Way things again because a bunch of His Way members came out for Grandma's funeral. Me talking to authorities just didn't occur to me. I just was so traumatized from everything going on back to back, including my dad showed up at every job I had. I was taking voice lessons from one lady at a place that was kind of close to where the fire had happened, like from a few blocks away. And he showed up at her house when I was not there, and he quit my voice lessons while I was not there, and he threatened her. And then he did that to a daycare job I had. I was working multiple jobs to try to pay rent and stuff, and he threatened my boss at the daycare. And so when I showed up for work, they all told me, Emily, your dad said you quit. What are you doing here? And I had to like prove myself to them that I never wanted to quit. And so
doing this, you're an adult at this point. You've left the ministry. You've left your like other church. Why is he doing this? Why is he sabotaging your life?
He did that in so many ways, Kacey. I had an uncle, his brother, who was so kind to me, and he paid for me to do at-home college course in graphic design. And when I got a computer and I was working on that college course, almost getting my final, or preparing for finals, that my dad's brother paid for and supported me in, my dad dismantled my computer and deleted the software, so I could not succeed. I had to push through that.
Is this just the kind of like your father taking your grandpa's place and just controlling every aspect of your life?
Yes, definitely. He has shown up at every job I had when I lived in the Midwest, and my voice lessons that I was paying for out of pocket. I think it was $150 at the time an hour. When you're a young 20-something-year-old kid who's like working multiple jobs just to pay rent, that was a big sacrifice on my part to even be able to do that. But yeah, he really didn't want me to use my voice. And even when my mom came to pick me up for my daycare job, after I convinced her to let me keep working there, my mom made me go to where the fire happened weeks after the fact, when there was just a pile of ashes there. She made me stand right where the ashes were. And it just made me feel like, Emily, this is what will happen to you if you use your voice again. And in fact, one thing my family said for many years after that event is, Emily, if you ever use your voice, if you ever create out loud, if you ever do anything, this is what Kevin is going to do to you too, because you had to be a witness in his murder trial. You were the one. I was the one person testified that he had premeditated this fire, and 3 people were killed. And forgive me, I skipped some of the details because trauma, it's just all over the place. But I ended up having to. Let me circle back. You're asking about when the cops found out I was involved. So basically, with my family trying to silence me so much, I didn't know that I could go to the cops. I really didn't. And then I was so fed up, though, that I ended up anonymously commenting on a newspaper article that was about the fire. And all I said was like, Kevin said he was going to do it for a long time. I'm not surprised. I just felt like I was just fed up. And that is when the detectives showed up at my family's house and asked to talk to me. And they were extremely nice to me, but they said I'm not in trouble, but they did wonder why I hadn't gone forward. And then they asked me to go with them to the station to talk to them. And they gave me a ride there. And yeah, I talked to them. And I just, in that moment, just told them as best as I could, everything that I could. But I hadn't mentioned the stuff with my grandma dying. I hadn't mentioned my family threatening me. I really didn't know how to communicate that at the time. I was just trying to get through one thing at a time. So the detectives ended up telling me that I would have to, there would be a mistrial of the arson trial going on, and I had to testify. And yeah, I was a key witness in this murder trial, and it was very scary because I had nobody supporting me. And, but I did it, and I did my best, and, I had to see people I went to church with testify against me, and that was really hard. But, yeah, all I have in my heart for those people now is love. Like, I really think that event with Mary was just so traumatic that it just jumbles up the truth, It just makes it really difficult to, yeah.
If they are raising money for Mary's murderer's murder trial and Mary's murderer's new wedding whilst in prison, I mean, that speaks volumes to the level of control that he had over his own group of followers.
That's true. That's very true.
So I guess we just don't even know how much influence he had on them testifying against you. This is wild. So your dad, your father, is he like, he doesn't want you to he doesn't want you to go to the police, or he just doesn't want you to have a life? He wants you to come home and live under his control? What is his motive for doing all of these things to you and stopping you from having a job and hobbies and being creative? Is there a reason for all of these things?
He always had creative dreams, and I think as somebody who struggled with narcissistic personality disorder and sociopathy, he always saw me as a threat to that whenever I created. And so he always wanted me to be smaller than him in what I did and what I put out there. In fact, I hate to say it, but he probably won't be happy I'm doing this show. Oh well. Hi, Dad.
Yeah, I mean, if we make it about him, he might be happy about it then, but I don't know. I mean, that's how narcissism works.
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually had a concert. It was my first concert in a bigger venue, and I was so excited. I actually invited my family to it. That was back when I thought they might support me and cheer me on. And would you believe it? The moment before I went on the stage, it was a night where there were lots of different artists playing. The moment before I went on the stage, there was an announcement that the backstage was on fire. And I couldn't sing my song that I had spent weeks preparing. Yeah. I to this day, I don't know if that's connected to my dad, but I kind of wonder. I just mean, I know it sounds paranoid, but he literally showed up.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to your vocal coach and threatening her. It does not sound like a far stretch that, he might have gone and started a little fire.
Yeah, and I just want to mention briefly, even after I moved to California, he showed up from out of state at my house when I was not there, and I had no warning. All I had was my roommate at the time was like, Emily, do you have a dad with a beard, kind of like Abe Lincoln? And I was like, yeah. And she said, he tried to come in your house today. Yeah, this is somebody who lives 2,000 plus miles away from me. He showed up at my house while I was
horrendous.
Los Angeles. Yeah.
And your roommate's just like, how do you even begin to explain that to your roommate? You're like, yeah, sorry, my dad's like a bit of a stalker. He's a bit, a bit of a harasser. If this was like a man and his wife, or like a woman and a celebrity, or a man and a celebrity, like there'd be lawsuits and harassment, lawsuits involved. And what is it when you get a thingy taken out against somebody? What's it called?
Restraining order.
Yeah, there'd be restraining orders involved if this was like, but with a parent and a child, I don't think people connect the dots in the same way. Like, this is still stalking and harassment.
Yeah, well, that wasn't the only thing that happened, but honestly, I feel like when you leave a cult, it is like needing to have a restraining order, but with 50 people, they're all like messaging you and trying to bother you. Yeah, that's what it feels like. So that's why
That is
it's
so
kind
true.
of challenging to get a restraining order because it's a lot of people involved in it. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is wild. Your housemate's like, oh yeah, by the way, this guy shows up. Oh my gosh, so your dad is trying to control every aspect of your life, doesn't want you to be independent, doesn't want you to succeed for whatever reason he has in his mind, and goes as far, and your mum too, they go as far as using the the arson and murder that your friend committed to threaten you and to intimidate you into not doing creative things, which is just absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah, I mean, it was people who already wanted to silence me before this happened. I was the family scapegoat. And then I think that, Kevin going through with that fire and the murder that happened from that, I think they saw that as an opportunity probably to further silence me. Because at that point, they told me I had to change my name. They told me I had to disappear. Like, they were just, and maybe some of this was real fear they were feeling. They were afraid for themselves. Like, I remember they talked about being afraid he would show up at their house. But it really took me years to even feel brave enough to reach out to that same detective I talked to before. And he was just so kind to me. He talked to me for like half an hour, like a few years ago. And that just was so healing, to have that reassurance. And he's like, yeah, he just was very kind to me, and he was reassuring. He's like, I think you're fine. It's going to be okay. And, yeah, but that was after over a decade where my mom would tell me that this kid would come after me if I ever talk. Yeah.
Okay, so there's like an aspect of wanting to control all the elements of your life, but also a fear of retaliation from Kevin. They're like, if you tell anybody about Kevin's premeditation, then there could be retaliation from Kevin.
That's what they were thinking.
Right.
And but they really pushed that aggressively. Like, I mean, there's no reason they should have driven me to where the ashes were. Like, that's just totally uncalled for. Because to me, that tells me they're the bigger threat to my voice than Kevin ever was. Like, that they showed up every job I had at my house when I wasn't there. They even, oh my gosh, when I lived in Pasadena, I had a hospital stay because I had a seizure test overnight. They sent my childhood pastor to the hospital because he had access as a military, sorry, let me backtrack. Not a military chaplain. Sorry, I was thinking my grandpa. As a hospital chaplain, he showed up in my hospital room when I'm in my hospital gown with no bra and wires attached to my head, literally just living my best life, but needing privacy. And he shows up, this guy I hadn't seen since I was 5 years old in San Francisco. Yeah.
That is so random. I don't even know. Would you be like, I think it is. Surely not.
Oh, yeah. Forgive me. That was just so random to put out there. But when people talk about leaving a cult and the stalking that goes on, just believe them. Like, there's some crazy, I mean, just be open-minded. If you're like, this sounds too crazy. No, they do crazy stuff.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. The fair gaming experiences of cult survivors is wild, but oftentimes provable. You know, sometimes if you talk about a cult enough, you'll find some person standing outside on the other side of the road just watching your house a little bit, or, you know, following you around in a car. And that sounds insane, but it is, it is happening.
No, it does really happen. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. And this anonymous post you put up on a or comment that you put on an online article about the fire.
Yeah.
Were the police able to trace like an IP address and that's how they found you, or were you identified in another way?
Oh, yes. So, the newspaper was connected to the news station where I was working, and one of my coworkers actually was like directing the local news, and he was really curious who this anonymous person was. So he did his own like digging up stuff. He actually found a blog I had, and he connected the dots that was me. I think through a username or something like that.
Okay.
I feel so bad about it because I loved working with that person. And I never wanted to be dishonest and not share what was going on, but I literally just felt unsafe to tell my coworkers about what was going on. Everything that I was going on, that I was going through with my family threatening me and stuff. I think he maybe felt that I was being, I mean, I can't speak for what he actually felt, but after that, he didn't really like me, I don't think. And I think he didn't agree that I hadn't spoken up. And so, for several weeks at work, after it did come out that I was the surprise witness, every time I walked by, he would say, "I hope they die in a fire." That was the line he would say. And it just hurt my heart so much because I didn't feel understood. I didn't feel like he got it. And,
yeah. I mean, it sounds like he took it personally.
Yeah, I think it absolutely would have been the right thing to speak up to authorities right away. But there was just so much going on. In fact, my grandmother's funeral that happened the month after the fire happened, my dad forced me to photograph her body at the funeral. And that was very traumatic for me. That was one of those events that just further made me feel like I had to be silent because it was so creepy. But yeah, he made me photograph her body in the casket and then upload it to his the family computer at home. And basically it just made me feel further separated from being able to reach out for support because I just was faced with a lot of like scary stuff at home.
I mean, your co-worker's taken it personally without any context of the situation that you're in, which is particularly severe, you know. It's not just one tragedy or two tragedies combined. It's several tragedies compounded into one period of your life where you've already experienced significant trauma leading up to these things happening one after another after another. So I mean, I can understand why he would be like, I don't understand why she didn't talk out about this. But knowing all of the things that we know, of course you didn't talk. Of course you didn't. Of course your first thought wasn't like, I must go to the police and report this. Your first thing is like, wow, I need to work out a way to survive all of this. Like, how do I exist through all of these things? How do I take care of myself? How do I breathe? How do I like eat? How do I, earn money? You're not thinking about, things like going to the police. And we understand that, but I can see why he wouldn't.
Yeah, I got to see him a few years ago at a party with other coworkers, and I got to say, just, I forgive you, and I hope you're doing well, kind of, and that was really, really good. But to this day, I don't think he ever knows my full backstory on what happened, and yeah, I just have, I just wish him well. But yeah, that was really rough to have somebody, every time I came to work, say that they hope I die in a fire. Like, that was really hard.
I mean, it shows us why we should always be kind to people, because you never really know what's happening to
Never really know.
anybody.
Yeah.
Because I imagine a lot of people you worked with never would have guessed that, you know, you grew up the way you did and that all of these things were happening in your life at the same time.
No, I don't think most of them knew. Some of them knew about the domestic violence I was going through at home with my family, but they didn't. I don't think they knew the full extent of what happened. So, and I also, that was still when I felt like no one would believe me. It was just such a crazy experience to live in a commune and all that.
So you are the sole person to testify that Kevin premeditated this fire. He told everybody he was going to do it. He had intention to do it, despite having, you know, friends from the church speak against you. You stood up, you testified, and Kevin did go to prison.
Yes. Yeah, he served 10 years in prison. And to my knowledge, I believe he's out. Last I heard, he is working.
There's this period in your life where all of these things happen and you don't feel like you can tell anybody about it. But then you do get to a point in your life where you decide, maybe I'll give it a go. Maybe I will tell my story to somebody and see what happens. And it's quite a liberating experience. And I wondered if you could just talk the listeners through, you know, that stage in your life where you're like, it's a hard thing to talk about, and I don't know if you're going to believe me, but here we go.
Yeah, so just being through so much trauma, I had many years where I didn't think I was lovable by anybody. I didn't think anyone would accept me. I was too much of a mess. And I also felt like it was all just so crazy, so dark, that I felt like I was too much if I opened up to a friend or anybody about it. And then after many years of therapy, I did 15 years of therapy, which really helped me heal a lot from a lot of this. But I finally decided to open up to friends. And this is my first time, by the way, to share this publicly about what I went through. But I did open up to a few close friends. And one of them, I remember I was so scared she wouldn't believe me, but she seemed to really care. And so I was like, I'm going to go ahead and tell her. And she's a person that was from my same state that I was living in the Midwest. And yeah, I finally opened up. I was vulnerable. I was real. And I told her, everything about it. And to my amazement, her dad was one of the firefighters that night. And she knew exactly what I was talking about. She knew exactly the fire I was talking about. And she was kind. She said, Emily, it's not your fault. She said, I just want you to know the firefighters never thought it was your fault, even though you tried to stop it. And it was an event that not just greatly impacted me, but also her family. And so opening up ended up just, I feel like, grew our friendship even more. Yeah. That just blew my mind, like, that it was her dad was one of the firemen. This person that I was
wild.
free to open up with my story about for years. Like, yeah.
There's so many coincidences that seem impossible, but they're happening, you know. Your granddad sharing a name with James Warren Jones. You know, you working at the news agency when the story comes in about the arson. Your friend having a father who was working that night at the scene of the crime. There's so many things in this story that kind of bring everything full circle, you know. Your grandpa claiming to offer something that Mary was actually offering people. There's so many things in this story that bring it all around. And it's like in between these people in your life that use fear and threats to control you and to make you feel like you're never going to find love or that you're not worthy of love. There are a few people that come through and show you that you are. And
Yes.
I just want to take a moment to appreciate those people. When we hear about heroes in these episodes, I always like to be like, yes, to those people, because sometimes they can be the difference between life or death, literally.
Literally, yeah. I do not know where I would be without the people who are kind, who accepted me the way I am, and who, people that I've gotten to be creative with, to make art, film, music with, people who let me be vulnerable and broken and still said I'm okay, like still want to be my friend, or, still accept me, because, over the first half of my life, like more than half of my life, I spent without people like that. I spent without support, without love and kindness around me. And I just am incredibly grateful to have found some healing and to finally finding out who I am, through creating and through vulnerability, and just, yeah, I'm just so grateful to be alive today. My little brother, Nathaniel, I lost him 2 years ago to suicide. And he was such a dear friend to me. And he was the one relative I had that acknowledged we grew up in a cult. And he was just endlessly trying to get out himself. And I just respect so much that he gave all he had, to try to have a good life and try to be free. And so I made a promise to him after he passed that I will never silence my voice again. I'm going to always speak up for him and for everything we went through. And I want my daughter to know that she can be proud to share her story too someday. Like, that you don't have to be afraid to share your story just because of what you come from. Like, maybe somebody out there might need to hear it. So
that's so beautiful and empowering, and also like breaking the cycle, because your grandpa was a certain way, your dad sounds like he was the same certain way, and here you are, like another one of those things that's like almost like an impossible coincidence. You have a beautiful family through the adoption process, despite being part of pro-life rallies, enforced to be part of pro-life rallies as a child growing up. Like, how wild are these? How wild are these, like, differences? The contrast now to your life is just like, it makes me smile so much.
Well, it just blows my mind. I have not had a single relative acknowledge my adoption or my child. And I have learned to be okay with that, because I believe no contact is absolutely the healthiest thing for me. But it blows my mind that after all the years we spent, at pro-life rallies, trying to talk to women about adoption, that they would not talk to their own kid who adopted a child one day. That's so weird to me. But yeah, there's things that have happened in my family since I escaped this cult that I'm just so grateful for. Like the same time that my daughter and her first mom joined our family, the very same 2 weeks, I had a nephew born from my husband's, my sister-in-law had a baby. And then shortly after that, a relative reached out to me on 23andMe that I had no idea existed. He's amazing. He's aging out of foster care, and he loves music and tea just like I do. And it's just been such an extraordinary gift to find these people that I never dreamed I would get to love and have a part of my family. And yeah, I'm getting to go see my daughter's birth mom next week. I'm so excited. This is going to be their first chance to give each other a hug in person since my daughter was born. And I know I'm going to be crying, but I just feel like love is really what makes a family, and it can be different. My family sure was different to begin with, being a cult and all that, but I am just so grateful for the family I have today.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are just like gonna nurture and love and be everything to your little girl that you needed when you were growing up. And how beautiful is that? Like it's like really emotive, but it's great at the same time, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Everything that you needed, you get to be now for somebody else, which just, yeah, it's great.
To team up with her first mom on this and give her a good,
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way. Like, it's just amazing that we can give her that together. So.
Also, if you would have accessed abortion care for whatever reason, or if you needed to go through that procedure for whatever reason, I bet your family would have reached out to you then, wouldn't they? We heard this about you.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know what they think about me adopting. It's just so weird to me that they've just completely ignored it. But
well, you don't need any of them to have a beautiful and happy life as you are experiencing in real time, which is amazing.
Yeah, I still, care deeply about some of my family, and just I wish them the best. I hope they're able to be free and be safe and happy, and yeah.
So what is next for you, Emily? You're on a path of healing and recovery. You are working through all of these traumatic experiences and living a different life now. You are a creative person and you use that creativity as part of your healing journey. Do you have any plans to put your creativity and your experiences together in like a formal project, like a memoir or like a book of poems or a book of songs? Or are you just kind of going day to day and taking things as they come?
Yes, I am working on an album with my friend right now. I'm helping them with backup vocals on this. But I am also writing music with them, and my focus right now with creativity is creating things that are helping people who don't have a voice. So I'm producing this song right now that's about escaping the cult and about starting your life over. And I'm also working on a film for refugees in Pakistan who were affected by the war in Afghanistan, and they have a free sewing school for girls, and they make doll clothing for 18-inch dolls. And yeah, we're doing a film together in a couple weeks, and I'm just so honored to be a part of that. I really feel like with the film and the music work that I do, as much as I can, I want to help people's voices be heard and help you be vulnerable and proud of who you are, and that's just what I really care about. So yeah, I'm so excited.
It's all incredible and really exciting. And again, just empowering women, empowering people that have had life-changing traumatic experiences and maybe don't feel as strong in their autonomy as they should do. And you're helping people to recognize that. And that's amazing. I can't tell you how thankful I am for you coming here and sharing your story. You started today with talking about how you want to show people that they do have a voice and that they can use their voice and that they can share their story. And this is the first time that you shared your story publicly. So you've just shown how, you said people can recover, people can have a happy life. There is love outside of the cult. Even if you are battered and beaten down into believing that can never happen, you are living proof that it can, and that you can reclaim your autonomy, and that you can speak out, and that you can be brave and strong and break the cycles of generational abuse. And I just think all of those things are amazing, Emily. I think you're amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kacey. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for what you do on the show. has meant a lot to me as a survivor the last several months to listen to it. And thank you. It means so much. And I just hope that even if this episode helps one person out there to feel heard and know that they can keep going, I hope that it helps them out. Thank you.